live?
A lot.
Okay, let's wait for some people to join in this live. It is Sunday morning, 12 a.m. And we are doing our first live, guys.
Okay.
Welcome. Wait, here we are. About to flip it over. Hello, Mir Shakir.
Cheers. Hello. Hello, everyone. We are here to hang out with you guys and discuss all sorts of cool things that are on our mind,
Yes.
our shared consciousness here today. Um, and mainly just for Yvette and I to have a discussion with you guys, witnessing whatever we decide to talk about or
That's
debate
it.
about.
We're debate. Uh
We
oh.
were
Ding,
talking
ding, ding.
earlier about content and whether or not it's better to put content out that kind of goes all over the place, where you talk about all different kinds of stuff, or content that's more specific to a certain thing. Um, and we had a difference of opinion there.
Yes.
I thought it was interesting to for people to talk about all different kinds of stuff, and then kind of anchor back on what they do. And Yvette was the opposite of that.
Yes.
That's a question, though, right? What's good content these days, and what's obnoxious or self-centered, or should it be obnoxious and self-centered? Is that the thing that gets everybody interested in seeing you?
I believe that the content should be subject based. So, we're two artists, and, most of the discussion should be somewhere around the realm of art and perspectives on art. Because, generally, I think that that's why people follow some of the stuff that you do, and look towards you for inspiration or just some recommendations or whatever's on your mind. But you can kind of pepper things in a little bit and touch on different topics. But in the end, really, I feel like the main subject matter is artists, art. And yeah, that was my perspective on that. So
Yeah, and I'm of the school of thought that it's cool to hear people talk about things that are sort of outside of their subject, their professional realm, or what their industry is. That it's just cool to hear. It's cool to hear people that have credibility in whatever the thing is that they do um, talk about other stuff, like maybe a race car driver who's really successful at driving race cars talks about how he approaches his family life, or stuff like that. Just stuff that's off subject, because I think that's what gives a great connection to people who have a broad range of involvement, and kind of the things that are the same about everybody is that many people have families, and many people have children, or a dog, or you know a father, and talk about, like, oh, my dad was like this, or my dog is my dog does this, or this is how I trained my dog, or just stuff like that. That's off subject. Obviously, if you're a Formula One racer, then you can speak on that subject, and people would be interested in that subject, and definitely people who race cars would be interested in that subject. and hearing you talk about that. But that's kind of a smaller group of people than the number of people with a dog or a daughter or just regular life stuff. And I think hearing people that have credibility in something that they do in their life just gives them universal credibility in a way. And it makes it interesting for me personally to hear them talk about all different kinds of things.
Yeah, but in a way, you just, I think when you're looking for something on YouTube or when you're following someone for their content, it's because they're hitting a particular subject matter that you're interested in. So, for example, we do murals, we do art, do different things related to art, and I feel like people would be interested in those subject matters like this art piece, like, okay, let's talk about that, or let's talk about some experiences while doing murals and things like that. And then the next things that you're going to see on our page is also the process of creating murals and the process of being in the studio and mixing paint or whatever. It feels like you would have a lot more to offer to people in terms of like that's what they're looking for, that's what they find, and then they know that they can go to your page every single time and get something, within that spectrum of topic. And that doesn't mean that you can't pepper things in about experiences or things like that or perspectives, but for the most part, to me it seems better that, you know whatever you're talking about would be more related to that subject. Or it's just kind of, it can kind of go all over the place. And, you know, I'm not sure. Is that, I mean, when I look for things online and when I'm looking for particular people that I'm following, it's definitely based on the subject. And I like that they put out videos on this subject, and then they give different perspectives and they give different kind of feedback on things. So I can look to those people to find what I'm looking for. And I was making the reference earlier that it's like going to a library. You don't want to go to a library and then just pick up a book that talks about every single thing because you wouldn't really, you're not really looking for that. But maybe you would go to a library and find a book on dogs because you're looking for a particular subject on dogs. And then within that book, there's references, there's experiences, there's maybe like, just different things that may be related to that subject. And then it kind of helps you navigate the subject and know that every time you're going to come across that content, it's going to be more or less related to that. If I start talking about fitness and what I eat and just different things that aren't related, it seems like we would potentially lose people's interest, but maybe not. I don't know. What do you guys think? Comments.
It's like when you're, it's like when you're, it's like
That
TikTok.
chair
It
squeaks a
squeaks a
bit.
lot. Yeah. I'm trying not to move so it doesn't squeak. But I was gonna say it's kind of like TikTok is like that. The most addictive platforms, they just go all over the place. 1 second you'll be watching somebody swimming with a whale shark. The next second somebody's crashing their car. The next video it'll be just it goes into so many different things. Um, I think when in the early stages of those platforms, people weren't even ready for that type of content yet. Now it's like you know it and you expect it. That kind of scrolling through your social media timelines, you're gonna run into all sorts of different content. You know, you're not really expecting it to be one type of thing. But
But that's, I guess,
I don't think there's any wrong way, and I think you were right about it being like, okay, you go and you search for something specific. That's like saying all of the internet is keyword driven. And so yeah, you do end up searching for keywords to some extent. But I think once you choose people that you find interesting for whatever reason and you start to get to know them by watching their content, you start to discover the things that they really like, even though they do something else. Because everybody is kind of like that. Everybody is like, oh, I'm a newscaster, but I love dogs. and I love going on family trips and like, oh, the last time we went on a family trip, we went here and this was what we did there and it was super cool and whatever. And I think that that part of it is the part that really kind of connects to just the general public out there that might not be really that interested in whatever the other thing is that you do, but they find it interesting that you have credibility. And then it's like just hearing those conversations and like feeling a little bit involved or connected or like you're invested in it just because it's part of your life as well. But I don't disagree with what you're saying. Which I said earlier. Just I think it's true. It is keyword driven. But I think if you watch the same, if you're like, oh, I like this person, and I watch a bunch of their content after like the 20th video you've watched of them, the 30th video you've watched of them, maybe the 200th video, you start to know other things that they're into, and then you're kind of curious. You're partly going there because at some point this guy might bring up aliens, which you love aliens, you love talking about aliens or UFOs or physics or something like that, but that's not really what you get to do all the time. But anytime the subject comes up, you find it interesting. So I think kind of like that. That is random, but over time, people can kind of sift through the randomness if they watch a lot of your content, and they'll come to conclusions about what you're really into. Like, oh, this guy really likes dogs, even though he never really. Podcast is not about dogs. He's an animal lover. That's it.
And that's it. The live is over, guys.
That's it.
No, I think it's just it's I think the word random is good because that's kind of what it would feel like in a way. It would feel like a lot of kind of random things, and you know, I think a lot of people that are doing content creation, the keywords are definitely important, and I think we gravitate towards different people. So when, for example, you said TikTok, but you're mentioning it in a way where it's like, oh, you're scrolling, but yeah, you're scrolling on different accounts. It's all different ranges of subjects of different people. But when
Mhm.
you go to a particular page of that particular person, I think the most successful people are the ones that kind of stay on those like similar topics. And I say that because I follow a lot of people that it's all kinds of ranges, but I look towards their page so that when I'm looking on my content page, I'm getting randomness. Yes, I'm getting like fitness and health and like, just different things depending on what that person, different people cover. But I know that I can look forward to like somebody's live because they're gonna be talking about this subject again. I'm like, yeah, like it feeds me every single time, yeah, I like that they talk about this, like, and they'll talk about it in different ways. Um, but I think if they just kind of started talking random things at all times, then I wouldn't really feel like that's even what I want to listen to that day. I may not even go to their videos. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Okay, I guess you're talking about the universe today. And then you're talking about fitness, you're talking about art, or you're talking about making music. Then, just different people are into different things. And it seems like the audience would feel a little disconnected a little bit after a while. Like, you know, I mean, it's got to be good. If it's good, it's good. Well, I mean, if it's good, then randomness might be a good thing. You can just you know, uh, talk endlessly into just different subject matters, and then, you know, if it's good, people will follow it, sure. But I seldom feel like I seldom follow anybody that talks randomness. It's usually the reason I follow their pages is because it's hitting like the keyword or the subject that I was looking for, and I know that the next video they're gonna post, they're gonna go deeper into that subject, and I'm gonna gain some new and they've thought of a whole new, brand new topics to discuss on that subject. I'm just like feeding that part that wants to be fed mentally, So
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like it's almost like a comedian who talks about comedy all the time.
mhm.
like the best comedians, they touch on comedy every now and then. They may talk about, what it's like to be a comedian, or other comedians, and like the industry and how what it's like. But in general, though, they just make jokes about all kinds of stuff. You know them to be a comedian, and that's the anchor point. That's what that's what you go there for, because you know that they're a comedian. But to
Exactly.
me, the most interesting comedians are like people in general, that they're commentating, or they're commenting on all sorts of things, because you can't deny the fact that all sorts of things are impacting you.
Okay, but now imagine if this comedian started like reciting poetry next time you go, and then he started playing the drums next time, and then he started like,
No, but that's
then
different
you'd
though.
be like, I came here to watch comedy, and I'll go to you to listen to comedy, not to like now hear you now. This, you see, that's
Well,
what
it's
I'm
more
kind
like
of. That's
things
what
that
I'm
you.
saying.
It's more like things that people universally do. Like, oh, oh, I bought a Tesla, and now I'm an electric car driver, and so you elaborate a little bit about what it's like being a part of this new community, new industry, or, that type of thing. But you always do it from sort of a comedy perspective. So in a way, that's what it is, right? It's like, as an artist, you would do content that always has some creative angle about it that's interesting in that sense. But you could talk about all kinds of things. You're not really limited just to talk about art. Just like a comedian, it's like that's an interesting one in general, because a comedian, it's like their job is really to talk about all different kinds of things, but they're still just one thing.
But their subject matter is making jokes. That's what I'm saying. Like if you're
But
if
not
you're looking
always,
up the
though.
subject, you're like, I'm if I'm looking up a keyword, I'm looking up comedy, making jokes. The subject matter can range for sure, but I'm not looking up like singer or poet, poem maker, or
Yeah,
Tesla car driver. You know what I mean?
that's
Like
what I'm
I'm
saying.
looking
That's
up
what makes it like,
in particular, I'm looking up like comedy. And
yeah,
so then if I go and I go to this page or I go to a YouTube channel, like I'm literally looking for comedy because that's what I want to be entertained by.
yeah.
But if he starts talking about like a range of other subjects, I think my interest personally would be like, I mean, what happened to the comedy?
See, that's
Like, what
exactly.
happened to the comedy? Like, oh, this is, and then it might not even be that interesting anymore. I think for a lot of people because they're just like, oh, yeah, I wasn't really wanting to listen to this. Oh, this is just like you never know what you're gonna get. I guess it's a bag, um,
Mixed bag,
a
yeah.
mixed bag, right?
Yeah, I think that's what made podcast, because the podcast thing is kind of a recent thing. I mean, it's not been around for that long, but I think that's the main thing about it that makes it interesting. It's kind of open ended, people can come and talk about anything, but they have the background. They have something that they do, like, oh, this person is a comedian. Oh, this person is an author. This person is whatever. And they could come and they could talk about their subject, but they can also talk about a range of different things, which is it's interesting. I think to me, that's some of the most interesting content, the stuff that caught my eye the most with the podcast world, that it when it does kind of range, like the host can kind of bring on anybody about any subject. They're not limited either, you just like talk about anything. It's about conversations. I've heard it said before too that people are lacking in the conversational experience with so much social media, computer based interaction now, digital interaction, that like people are longing to be a part of and witness uh, conversational interaction, classical interaction, if you will.
People are
Just
not having
people,
conversations.
yeah, people are not having conversations as much anymore, and because there's so many ways that you can do it, kind of get it out of the way. It's like somebody saying happy birthday to you on social media every year, but you never really interact with them. So it's like
Yeah,
they could just kind of get it out of the way. So, you know, obviously there's certain podcasts that have been hyper successful just for having long form conversational things. Uh, so there's no way that you can have a conversation for hours and hours about just the same thing. You just kind of have to talk about whatever comes up. Anyway, I think that's a good fleshing out of that subject.
Okay.
Not to tell you know, you're welcome to go continue down that path. Just I think
We'll
that's
see. We'll see what the commenters say.
yeah.
That's how you really measure all this stuff.
We'll see how what the feedback
Do
is.
you think we should be discussing things that are based on kind of more of a art subject, which can range in perspectives and techniques and just experiences, different things, and peppered in with some of our thoughts and ideas, or should it just be almost like whatever subject matter comes to our heads? I'm not sure. Maybe it's interesting enough. I guess people could let us know how they search for content, what matters to them, who they follow. Who do you follow? Do you follow people that generally talk about a broad range of subjects, or do you follow particular pages that deal with like subjects that you're generally interested in? You know, um, I think I as just thinking about it in terms of media consumption. You have magazines and radio shows, and you have books and music and art, and it's all based on a particular subject. So um, like a radio station, for example, if they were to just play everything, then I think the reason why they wouldn't do that, and a lot of people wouldn't do that, is just because you went to that radio station because you're going to hear like the latest alternative or whatever, or you're only going to hear rock, but it's a range of different rock. But you're not going there where they're going to play like classical. Now they're going to play hip hop, they're going to play rock and alternative and country
See,
and
see,
all
that's the
these
future of
things.
radio right there.
And
To
then
me, that's the future of it.
and then
Probably
you're just
channels where they.
like, you're like, this isn't what I'm vibing with. It's not the music I even like. I don't even like this stuff. So, I think it's
Yeah,
important to kind of stay on some train of thought, some train of topic, so that
that's
we're
interesting.
connecting with some of the stuff that we do already, which is, doing murals, doing exhibitions, doing artwork. Amir, you obviously do a broad range of things, aside from art, music and things like that. But it's myself as well. Those subjects, are they brought in? I mean, they're in the range of art, but when I pepper in some experience I've had when I was young, I think that's interesting. But mostly you're interested in it because maybe you're more interested in hearing the perspective of an artist, or the perspective of someone that you can respect, because now you're seeing what their art is like. And oh, look, the next video we show is us in the process of creating a plaster relief, so people are like, oh yeah, okay, cool, I can come to this page and get like the minds of an artist. That's more of the range of what I feel like it hits. That's really the idea. And I think in that aspect we'll get more of a collective of people that are more interested in something like that. Of course, it's not to say that I don't want to like talk about it. There's a whole range of subjects that I could talk about, but I feel like personally I would be like, okay, you never know what you're gonna get. It's just a mixed bag. It's like it's all over the place. It doesn't seem focused. And there's platforms, I'm sure, of a lot of people that do that. And again, I don't ever find like the ones, maybe I don't follow someone that does that just randomly. Maybe
Yeah,
that's
style. Yeah, that's just not really your style.
yeah, it's not really my style. Like when I look for something, whoever I'm following on all my social media platforms, they're people that like they're hitting a particular subject, and I know what to expect. Like, okay, yeah, cool. They just made another video on this. Like, cool. I
Yeah,
know that like, and again, they're gonna range too. They're gonna range from their experiences and their thought process of things, but they're always still gonna kind of pivot back to the main subject matter, which is what kind of brought you there. You know.
yeah. You can't. I think you can't avoid the fact that we all live in the same world, and so when something extreme happens or interesting happens, kind of everybody wants to talk about it. that where a large part of what they do is talk about stuff. So they're like, oh, you know, you know, an alien or UFO landed in Brazil, or you know what I mean, just something that's like an extreme thing that happened, and you're gonna end up getting different styles of it. Like you're gonna get the Breakfast Club version of it. You're gonna get the Fox News version of it. You know, you're gonna get the Rogan podcast version of it. You're gonna get like different versions of that same information, and then it becomes like, oh, who covers it the best? But then news is news, right? News is not one thing,
The news is still a subject. It's current events.
but
It's mostly current events,
it's
actually.
not news about. It's not. They don't talk about news. They don't talk about creating news on the news. They're talking about stuff that's happening. And the things
Hmm.
that are happening, it's kind of the same for everyone. Like maybe somebody breaks a story that someone else doesn't, but once it breaks, if it's a big story, nobody really cares who broke it. They're just like, okay, we're going to talk about it too because we're going to give you our perspective of what happened. And then when it goes into the realm of editorializing, then it just becomes opinionated, and some people are willing to push the envelope or push the limits of what might be acceptable of a way to talk about it, or I love that type of content where it's you know like this guy is a pilot. He's a military pilot, and then he had like an alien experience, or a ship flew past him. Like, what was that? And then he's on this podcast and he's talking about the ship passing, and he has credibility really just because he's a pilot, and that's what makes him a very interesting person to talk about aliens, even though that's not something that he would usually be dealing with. Then it makes it like super credible. Whereas like the guy who every podcast talks about aliens, like it's the alien podcast, then it kind of loses credibility. Like, oh, okay. You saw another sighting last week. You just full of
Mm-mm.
sightings, aren't you? Where it's like,
Well, I think it's a little different though if you're like interviewing different people. I was saying that too,
definitely.
like, if you're like, oh, we interviewed this pilot this one time and then he talked, but I think if you had like an alien podcast, you'd have different people talking about different alien stuff, and then you would talk about history and current events about that, or,
It's
you know.
just I would never want to watch a show that was dedicated to alien stuff because I would just wouldn't believe it. Even though I love that subject and I think it's very interesting, I think the most credible people to talk about it are people that don't really talk about it every day. Because then they're just kind of addicted to the subject, and their information starts to become more like a sales pitch than just a truthful conversation about something that's happening. Not that it wouldn't be truthful, but that's this is way down the rabbit hole of like how to interpret things like that. But to me, that's the most fun content when it's somebody dealing with a subject that's just kind of random for them. They're professional in some sort of way, and that's cool. You can respect that part that they're a professional. Like, oh, it's a professor, and he's talking about something not really related to being a professor, but he's a fairly reliable, credible person, or she, because they're a professor that's respectable, respected to us to some extent in society. That makes it interesting. And then when they start talking about their subject, their actual subject matter, you can't say anything about that. It's like a physicist, and he's talking about training dogs and how he likes to go out on a canoe or something. And then every now and then he'll go into some physics stuff, and you're just kind of like, okay, whatever you say.
I mean, isn't it
I'm not
like,
the one with the physics degree, so okay.
I mean, again, I don't know what you're following this stuff, because I'm like, that would just sound so like odd, I guess. Like, what are you even talking about training your dog? Man, I would tune out. I'd be like, "Doop." Next subject. Like, where's the stuff I actually want to like, But again, I don't know. And a lot of people listen to this stuff, sitting somewhere, and it's all right for it to just go all over the place. But
There you go.
but again,
Well, that's
I feel
most
like
of
even
society
even
is.
the people that I would listen to, even some of the people that I listen to, that when they go off subject, I'm like, okay,
You off subject. I'm out of here.
like I do not
What
want
are
to
you
hear
talking
about
about?
your past relationships of something. Like, I'm good. Like, okay, I like the other subject matter that's like intense, or what I'm actually looking for. But that doesn't mean that people don't do it. I think people do it all the time, and it's good in a way to bring some like humanity into it, where it's not like, oh, it's just based on like an intellectual subject matter. Like, no, let's talk about some of the stuff, some of your experiences. Let's dive deep psychologically into like how you feel about things. What were your past relationships like? I think sometimes
Well,
people,
relationships is definitely a category that
no,
can
I'm
stand on its own.
I'm saying like, people that can kind of talk about just a broad range,
Yeah.
then in a way, I might tune out just because of that. Like, okay, I was definitely not like following you to hear that. Like, I'll go to the other page for that, or like a guy, for example. Let me give you an example. If a woman, let's say a woman has a political kind of talk show, something that she does online, and maybe I don't think that she's uh the best representation of like maybe femininity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then maybe she just starts talking about that stuff. And I'm like, that's weird. I usually come to your page because you're very historical, you're very factual. I love what you talk about. I love your subject. And all of a sudden she's like, yeah, so today I'm gonna put on my lipstick this way. And I'm just like, just sitting there kind of confused. Like,
Yeah.
I might just skip it, is what I'm saying. I
Yeah. I
might
don't
just
think.
skip it because I'm like, I definitely don't come to listen to give a makeup tutorial. I go to so and so's page for that. And then if
No,
she
it's
starts
just.
talking about, if the makeup girl starts talking about something political, then I might tune off of her bag because I'm like, you're not the girl to talk about the political stuff.
Yeah.
You're like, I respect the expertise of this woman more on that. I mean, that's not to say that they can't talk about those subjects though. That's not to say that they're not good at those subjects either. I'm just saying that personally, if I'm following like 100 pages and then they're all just random, I don't think it would be. I think my brain would feel a little scattered a little bit on how I know to follow those people, because we make associations.
I think
You
that's the
like, oh, I
difference
associate
between.
this person with this subject matter. I associate this person with this subject matter.
Like the difference between tutorials and discussions.
Hmm.
When you do want to go watch a tutorial on something, makeup, for example, or web design, or how to make a logo,
Right.
or like whatever it is, right? Then okay, you're going there for that, and you'll be able to determine if the content that the person is putting out is, if it's good. You can tell pretty quickly whether you like it or not. Like, oh, okay, this is good. Oh, I like this. This person has a good, clear talking voice. They don't have like a difficult to understand accent. Their makeup looks pretty good. Um, you can see things that will let you know pretty quickly whether or not you want to be educated by this person. But like educational content is educational content, and so that's not the same thing as discussion. But I think in discussion, in like passing discussion, you get some of the best little nuggets of information from people, um, especially people who have credibility doing something else. Like, oh, this guy's a historian, and then he's a professor at a university, and whatever, or whatever the profession is that the person does. That gives them credibility, and then again, they start talking about some other thing that they're really into. Like, oh, I got into making bread, and so I've been baking bread these past few months. It's really cool. I really like it. And then you kind of you see something that this person is interested in outside of what they do as a profession, basically. And then it just it just feels curious and interesting to me. That's like That's like the real information that people's lives are about. Uh, so if someone was listening to a conversation about, or like anybody, Dave Chappelle, anybody famous that you like or know that you think is interesting, some famous actor or whoever it is, right? And then they start talking about what their favorite soap is. I think that type of content is really interesting. You're like,
Right.
wow, this nigga, this person uses Irish Spring. Like, wow, interesting,
Yeah.
or like whatever it is. It's there's something cool about kind of just finding out, I guess in a way that's trivia, but it's not always trivia because it impacts your life in some way or another. You're like, oh, this person is very interesting to me, what they do, and they've been so successful, and I've always kind of wondered how they managed to reach this level of success doing what they do, whatever. And then they tell you, they go into something that's just very practical, like, oh, I hate dress shoes. uh, they're hard. I don't like to wear shoes like that. I only like to wear these types of shoes. And those are like real life lessons, where you can like, oh, that's interesting. I always felt that way too. Like, oh, me and this person are kind of similar. We're more similar than I thought, we would be. But you won't really find that so much from a person who's just expressing their professional point of view about whatever given thing, where it's bordering on educational or tutorial sort of
I wonder
content.
how much of that information you can retain on randomness like that.
It's just the things that really stick out to you. Otherwise, it doesn't. It just goes through you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, it sounds like that would just go through you. You're like, oh, Chappelle, like for example, right? Chappelle likes Irish spring soap. It seems like a conversation that he would have on randomness. You would just never remember those specifics of that. Like you'd be like, what was the conversation about again? But like,
Yeah.
if if it had just more direction to it, like he's talking about his whole comedy thing and his techniques and things like that, it seems like that would stick more mentally.
Well, it's like the life stories. That reminds me of a story. Speaking of Dave Chappelle, that I heard him tell, which I think that's what makes him such a great comedian, is that or any comedian, when they start telling stories about things that are not really, like, it's not really comedy right away. It's just kind of stories about stuff, and then they bring a punchline into it, but it's not even really a punchline. It's just the funny stories, but they're life lessons in a way. Like, he told some story about this place that he did a performance at, and then he was on the second floor, and it was supposed to be no music, and then there was a bunch of music in the place downstairs, and he goes down there screaming like, "Hey!" And the people that own the place, they took him in, and he got really scared, and you know he's kind of telling this story that, like, it's kind of about him being a comedian and trying to get there, but it's a lot about just him kind of making a bad decision and learning from that, not to be too pushy about something when you don't fully understand what's going on, what's happening. And like that's the lesson that I took from that. And it stands out to me. Obviously you don't remember everything, but then when you touch on a subject that's sort of in that realm, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's right. I do remember something about that. That was interesting. But that there's like a real life lesson in there to, like, you know, be pushy when you really understand what's going on. Otherwise, you could be pushy and then it backfires on you because you thought it was one way, but then you quickly discovered that something else was going on. And then that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the thing that anyone can take from someone who's highly famous, highly successful, very wealthy, and then now they just explained a story to you that made you connect to it in a way like, oh, I remember when I did that. So now you're similar to this person in that way. You have the same experience in a way, and then you learn from it too in a similar way, and then you can kind of like model yourself better based on that person's success. Because you're not going to be able to go out there and sort of be someone that you're not. You still have to be who you are. So it's nice to be able to realize that other people have had similar experiences to yours that makes you feel like, maybe I could be just as successful as this person, because I remember when something like that happened to me. So it wasn't the end of my world that happened. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like,
Like I remember when I tripped over this, and yeah, I
no, like
tripped over the rug and got up, and that's my resilient. No, I'm
no,
just
it
kidding.
would have to be
Just
similar.
kidding.
Yeah, it would have to be a similar thing. Like
But
you went in talking a bunch of trash to someone because you thought something had happened a certain way, and then you didn't really let them talk, and then once they finally got out to you what was going on, you were kind of like, oh, I'm sorry. Let me get out of here. I never meant to come in here and bother you people. Sorry about that. And then you kind of walk away with your tail stuck between your legs, like, oh, I should have known better than that. I think those types of life stories can connect to people. They're not that interesting if you're a homeless man that lives on the streets of Miami or wherever, whatever city, Then it's like your sort of anecdotal experiences don't bring that much value. But if you've become extraordinarily successful, multimillionaire, whatever, then your story about being homeless is really interesting at that point. Because then you're going to connect to a bunch of other people who've been homeless that kind of felt like, I'm a trash person, and I'm never going to get from life what I want from life. But then you see people, someone that's extremely successful that you've always looked up to, you always sort of wanted to be like or mimic them, and then you find out that they had a similar experience to yours. Then you feel charged again, like, okay, so I just gotta stay focused, it's not over yet, because that's like the most authentic stuff in a way. Like if you go to a place where people are always talking about crazy stories that happen, that's interesting as well. But that's not the real authentic. Like that show, what is it? It's like the underbelly, the white underbelly or something. You never heard of that?
mm-mm.
It's like some show that would pop up on my feeds every now and then. The underbelly something, and it's like a guy who's interviewing people who who are like drug addicts, like really strung out, or just like people who are really sad cases, basically. Like, oh, it's this pretty 19-year-old girl that's like a crack and heroin fiend, and then he just asks him a bunch of candid questions and they just answer them.
Mm.
It's like that's interesting too, but that's like being entertained by trauma. That's like trauma entertainment. But where, because you're that person is still in that situation. But if it's whoever, name the A-list actor, and then they're telling you about their when they were a heroin addict for 5 years, living under the bridge and whatever,
But
then you can connect to that in a way, I think, that helps people to feel like they can get out of it, instead of it just being like traumatic stuff that's affecting a person currently. Anyway, I mean that ties into the same idea, I think, of just being like, sometimes random content is the best, most honest content, because it's just, there's no real reason for this person to tell you about this thing or try to convince you of something, like the way someone who's telling you how to do your makeup, or someone who's telling you how to export a file in a certain way or something like that. Like, those are testable, because you can look at it and see, like, oh, your makeup is terrible. Why are you trying to tell people how to do makeup? First of all, But if their makeup looks good, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, let's see. What did this girl do? How'd you even do that? So that that information that's just almost like random, but someone credible is really it's really interesting. And it can be stimulating too. Like, oh, this guy, oh, it's interesting. He likes making bread. That's crazy. I like making bread. I've been making bread for like 2 years now. You feel connected to this person now on something that just, but this person is just an actor or comedian or something. But in their personal life, something they never really talk about, they like to make biscuits.
But I think you're talking about more like people who are just famous or credible, but like their experiences. That's like, I think that's just a little different. That's almost like saying I would read a biography on somebody who, I'm interested in, and then I read about some of the stuff they're into. But
See, that's a good
but
example right there. That's a perfect example.
but that's not really them creating a whole show that just like is talking about just a bunch of different things. So like that's more of like, I don't know. That's more of like
I think
just
it's perfect what you said, the
random.
autobiographies, because that is what it's like. You
Just
wouldn't be
it
reading a
seems.
person's autobiography if they didn't have something interesting or credible about what they're doing professionally, even though you might not want to be a lawyer, but
But I'm
that
saying like
maybe that's what they were.
an autobiography, it ends. It's usually some of the most important subjects. It's like you could read an autobiography of somebody. You're not gonna spend like, you know, weeks and months just reading an autobiography on a person. They're gonna kind of highlight a lot of experiences and things, and you're gonna get that from there. But then it ends. That's it. The book closes. The ends. A podcast or like shows like this, they go on way longer than what it would take to read autobiography.
Which is why
In a
there's always so many new people, basically.
sense, like, when you're creating content, where you're a content creator, um, to kind of just speak on randomness, I feel like just might be a little bit odd, you know. That's all. And I mean, like, in the way, if you consider, I mean, who is it that's not famous? That's not like already famous, because I think it's very different when you're like, oh, I want to hear what Madonna does. I want to hear what Beyonce likes to do. I mean, those people build their whole
But that's
platforms
like pop
on
famous, though.
those people build their whole platforms on, you know, making music and making music videos and everything being about them, for a reason, because that's what you're looking for when you go to search for them. You want to know, oh, what do they got on? What are they working on? What's the behind the scenes of like some of the stuff that they do? Oh, what is it that she likes to eat the most? Oh, that's great. But I think when you're not like, when you're not like that type of person that's like reached that amount of fame based on the kind of work that you do, when you're just starting to create content, then I feel like it's better to be a little bit more specific. And I say this because, again, like, if you're gonna have a magazine, or if you're gonna have some record that you listen to, it fits more or less into a genre. So, people, I think, would be more receptive to that. If you're already famous, you know even those people who are already famous like that, and would talk about baking bread, like you said, for example, you know they've already built a lot of the fame based on all the stuff that I'm talking about, like their subject matter, which is like, you know oh, it's a scientist. Okay, well, this scientist has
There you
gone on
go.
a million interviews talking about science. He's gone on he's written a lot of books talking about science. He's, gone to different discussions and kind of, what do you call those? Mm, just presentations talking about science. So now he's had like 100 different things, for example, talking about science. So now when he goes on somewhere and he talks a little bit about science, and then he also talks about baking bread, yeah, that stands out definitely. But it stands out only because you he's regurgitated his whole science thing based on his subject matter. So, and that's what I'm kind of saying with like some of these things, what we're really even doing is a lot of art. So you're like, hey, where's the art? Or is this just like random?
Well,
It
you're
can be kind
saying
of
what
random,
you're
but
saying what I was saying though, that like you don't really want to hear the stories, the stories of failure from someone who hasn't shown some sort of success. That's kind of what you're saying there. But not necessarily famous though. But like maybe famous. So I mean, in our case, we've produced over 40 public art murals. We've done projects all over the country. We've worked with some of the largest developers in the country. Those um, those aspects of us that give us some credibility to talk about these things. Your history with work being in museums, broad range of different things that we could go into. It's sort of like our independent portfolio and body of work, but not everybody has a body of work. And so just that in itself separates you away. Like, oh, you're a professional artist. That's all you do day in and day out, year in and year out for the past 10 years. Then, then like, wow, you, as much as you might want to hear something about that, maybe you're not really that into art like that, but you're into people. You like listening to people talk about things, and you want to be somehow successful yourself, and maybe you're not there yet, but you like to find, you're looking for little nuggets everywhere. You're like treasure hunting to try to find stuff that stimulates you, that makes you feel like, oh, I should apply this to what I'm doing, and this can help me progress, you know?
it's like that's kind of what I'm talking about. I feel like if somebody with a reputation like that, people would probably be more interested in saying, how do I get there? How do you do what you do? What words of inspiration can I gather as an artist or somebody that wants to be where you are?
But we wouldn't
And
tell
so
them
they,
though.
that's,
That's
I'm
the whole
just
point.
saying, I'm saying
But they
like,
would have to read between the lines, like, oh, I see how she is.
I'm saying
That's
like,
how you do
I
it,
think,
not the stuff she said.
I think that people would be interested in like finding that information, especially when in all honesty there hasn't been that much like interviews and discussion about. We've had very few interviews and discussions to talk about what we do. We had one in Canada and a radio station, and but that's not like, to me, even that's not really enough to kind of put out into perspective into the world, how it is that we can most benefit people. And I think that the way you're going to mostly benefit people is kind of showing them, or kind of instructing in some way of what it is that you do, how you get there, even those experiences that you've had. People are interested in that on a more personal level. But I think it's all in relation to what you're an expert at, you know because again, I don't think there's enough of that. If there was, then I'd be like, okay, yeah, we've had already 100 interviews just based on this stuff. We've had like, a bunch of publications talking about all the questions that the interviewers ask. But in a way, I don't think really that that's enough. I think that that's really what people that will land on this page, and that's really what people would be more interested in. Just like, okay, like, I see what you do. You do all this amazing thing. You're obviously very talented. You obviously have this really amazing artwork. So, you know, what can I gather based on that subject matter? Because that's kind of what happens when you go out and you do interviews with other people. In a way, you can kind of tie in different little things, but most of the time, the interviewer, is going to kind of be asking you things in relation to the subject matter, because that's kind of what your expertise is, and people want to know about your expertise. They like to know personal stories, and I think that's always nice. And even when you talk about these things, if I think they're nice just to hear back and say, oh, okay, that's funny. Okay, that's right. You can fully flesh out an idea or perspective or an experience that you had. Um, but in the grand kind of scheme of things, um, I feel like to really kind of have a bigger audience is more based on like, hey guys, I like art, I like what you guys do. I see that, you're putting out more videos and things. Uh, and then the next video that's actually curated, because we have a lot of curated videos or edited videos, is still going to relate to that subject matter. That's all. I feel like it matters in that aspect. But otherwise it's a conversation about conversations. And
Well, I think the
conversation is
most of
talking
like,
about talking.
I think the most the but it's just that like our work is a more silent work. But like back to Dave Chappelle again, his work is not a silent work. You have to sit there and watch him perform the work. It's performance based. Ours is performance as well. We perform something, and in that moment, if you witness it, it's interesting. It happens slowly, and then it comes together. But it's really more so meant to just be enjoyed after the fact for a long time. So those are two different kind of types of bodies of work that you can produce, right? And just one of them, comedy, just by default, people are going to know your face better. They're going to be more familiar with you personally. um, but maybe or maybe not, they really listen to your comedy if they're into you in that way or not. But then if what it would really go even further would be if they were listening to you in interviews, and then some of the interview would be about comedy, but probably not most of it. It would just be about who you are as a person in a way. And to me, people who are interesting like that, people who are highly successful, you get the best truth from them when they're just talking about things that don't really relate to the thing that they're trying to sell you on, which is like for a comedian, it's comedy.
It's like you say sell, but it's not really sell. I think people are
Well,
just,
they want you to laugh. They don't want to feel like they bombed. So they're
I
trying
would
to
say,
sell you on laughing,
it's like you
That's
go
what
to
I
the
mean.
comedy show to kind of listen to the comedy, I think, right? So in a way, it's the same thing with the artist. You're like, oh, I want to go to the artist to kind of hear a little bit about art.
Well, but you have to be a
So
funny
you have
comedian
to.
though. They don't want to go to your show and then be like, "Oh, shit wasn't funny." Then it's like, "What? It wasn't funny." Like, yeah, he bombed. Like, wow. So he wasn't talking about funny stuff. That's like, and then just the idea of that is like a comedian trying to make everybody laugh and it's not working. And they're just like, "Oh, what do I do now?" It shifts the whole energy into something weird. But if it's a person that's really successful at doing that, they generally always make people laugh. 99% of the time, they don't bomb. Then there's something interesting about that person. It reminds me of that Cat Williams interview. Like he was just kind of talking about life and people, and like in a way, giving you the inside baseball about how he interprets people, and that's the thing that you can kind of take something from. Like, oh, that's what his personality is like. This is crazy. Like I gotta change my personality. No wonder it just hasn't been working for me. you know that's the part where you can really observe and take from. But if you go to one of his comedy shows, that doesn't really show you that much of the inner workings because it's a performance and it's really just it's meant to make you laugh. And if you don't laugh at it, then it's not working. So it's almost like you're in that moment of suspended disbelief, like you're watching the movie. Or good actors are like that too. You see them in an interview and then you'll be like, I didn't know this dude had a British accent. you know and then that changes everything about the stuff that you watched before, where you were like, I just didn't know this person had a British accent. So this is amazing. I have to like go back and watch this again, thinking that this person has a British accent and knowing that this is not really how they talk. Maybe it ruins it for you, but you would still catch that. And sometimes maybe, you somebody who seems really bold as a character, then you see them in an interview and you're like, oh, this person is really calm and docile. and then you've been trying to mimic this person that you've seen acting, but they're just performing. They're trying to make you think that they're bold because that's what their role called for. but their personality is not. It's really reserved and calm, and then that can help you to realize for yourself, like, oh, I don't have to be so bold in my normal personality. I could just be myself, which is more passive and calm. But then when I get in character, I gotta like really get in character. But I don't have to carry that around with me. So I think those are good representations of truth in a way, to see what a person's really like. I think that's the main reason that a lot of these interviews happen, because you want to see like what's this person actually like when they're not in this role where they're trying to convince me, which is what I meant by like
Uh,
trying to sell it to you.
but in a weird way, you're
You know,
almost saying that that's impossible without being in the same subject matter, and that's not true. There's still a possibility being within the subject matter. That's the point. I think the point is that when you're discussing whatever subject matter it is, that you're being honest. So you're being honest, and you're
but
giving
not
a
a, but
whole range,
if you're
you
acting in a
know.
movie though, you're not really being honest. You're being a
Well,
character.
but that's acting. That's different. I'm saying like if
Or if you're public speaking, or if you're a politician, or like it'd be interesting to have a moment to just have a conversation with someone like, let's just say Obama, and then when you're interacting with him privately, no cameras around or anything, you're like, this is what Obama's really like. Golly, I've been misinterpreting this the whole time. And I think in those moments you could realize for yourself that if you ever looked up to that person, that you would be like, oh, I got to be more like that. Or you might meet him and talk to him privately and be like, realize that he's almost exactly like what he's like when he's publicly. And then you can kind of take that from it. Like, oh, interesting. I need to be more universal where where I'm just the same character all the time, instead of like in private, I start swearing and cursing and I have this whole different kind of loose personality than when I'm on stage talking to people publicly. You know what I mean? That type
I
of
mean,
thing,
I don't
similar
know
to.
if I really believe that anybody's being that honest when they're on camera,
See,
period.
that's what I'm saying.
I don't think anybody's being that honest
But
because it doesn't matter if you have um if you're being interviewed or it feels like a relaxed environment. You're not, no one ever sees you in your mad state and the way that you really are, and I
I don't
think
know though. There's
those
glitches in the matrix
think that those are kind of like
where you see it like, oh,
I think those are kind of the real aspects of you know people that you're not going to get to see no matter what. So um everybody has some kind of a front in a way, and I don't think it takes away from people talking about personal experiences and in the way that they have perspectives on things. But even the people that are just candidly speaking about things, like, you're never really going to know what they're like, because I think to really know somebody, you're going to know 'em how they are mad, and no one's doing that. Who's conducting an interview where they're just starting to scream at each other and like,
Joe Rogan.
no, oh,
No,
not him
I'm telling
again.
you, like you've seen it enough times. If you watch a lot of it, you'll be like, oh, he actually just got mad right there, and he can't really hide it anymore in that moment
Yeah,
because it
he's kind of
just
different though, and I said
pierces
before
through.
that that his there's like
He's just it's just an example that's very visible,
I'm saying, like,
but you
he's
see
just
that with other people too, where you see them kind of, oh, okay, whoa, they started talking over each other a bit there. Oh, it got a little edgy, and then yeah, it's almost embarrassing for the watcher. Like, whoa, well, this
yeah,
is real now.
yeah.
So more learning experiences. I do that sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's just not gonna be fully honest, and I think that
That's true.
um, the best thing that you can offer people is something that can really help them. So in a way, like I said, I feel like people come to you for just to have a little bit of insight of your knowledge base, and everything else is kind of stories revolved around that. I did a live today and I talked about experience and I talked about art and I talked about, different perspectives that I have on certain people who criticize art and friends and things like that. And it had a little bit of everything in there. And that's not to say that it wasn't honest. It was 100% honest. And in fact, I even, I feel like there's triggering parts in there. Um, but is it exactly how I would express something when the camera's off? Probably not. I don't think, if something really angers me and I'm like, you know, that's not how I'm being kind of I don't want to be perceived in a certain way where I'm like, okay, yeah, the camera's obviously there. You're not gonna start arguing about things. It'd be just ridiculous.
No, but
Even
sometimes you
though
can't stop it though.
even though sometimes people will argue, but I don't think that makes for good content. No one really wants to hear an argument unless it's like your neighbors. You're like, oh, look at that with it.
Man,
But most of the time, that's why I say it's not truly honest. It's not truly
I saw a
honesty.
viral video today that
Right.
popped up in my feed of this dude who was doing an interview with some other guy, and then he was like, he had kind of got up out of his chair, and he was like, "I always talk trash to people." He had a Bible in his hand. He said, "Everybody that's been on my show, And then the guy who he was interviewing or talking to or whatever gets up and just punches him in his face with a hard uppercut, and they fall down right there on camera, and then the whole thing.
I'm saying, but like that
And
that may
like
be
that's
his,
ghetto content,
but that's his angle. You
But
know what I mean? Like
no,
that's
I don't
his
think
his
his
angle
angle
is
is
to
to
be
get punched in the
triggering.
face
I'm saying
in
his
the
angle
throat.
is to be triggering. And I think for certain people it is, but
That's
for
true.
most of the time we're not really like that's not our angle. Our angle is more based on like what we're doing. And what
But
we're doing every day has a lot of value and benefit to people
yeah.
that are seeking to be kind of inspired by that. So, does it help? I mean, we've had arguments when we first started doing art. And I don't think that those would be something that you'd want on camera at all. You'd be like, yeah, that doesn't help anything. That doesn't, it doesn't matter how honest it is what I'm trying to say. Like, it's never truly honest, because I think if people were truly, truly honest, you would probably see all of these things have more of like a fight, a debate, not the ones that are intentionally trying to be triggering, because there's people that's how they get their audience base. They're trying to be triggering on purpose. That's okay for them. But for the most part, if you're not like, that's not your angle, then no one's truly being honest when they're being, you know, unless you kind of see someone in a fight. Like they always say, you want to really know a person is you see how they argue with you, and be like, okay, now I can see who you truly are. That's the real truth right there. So I think even in those kind of open, people are just kind of talking about you know things that might just be past experiences or perspectives, but you know they're not really gonna address things like how they are when they're triggered. I think that's true honesty. You want to
Well,
be honest? Show what it's like when you get mad at something, and then people could really, really know the true you, and then be like,
I think over time
that
though,
guy is honest. Don't look at that person that
yeah,
gets mad, because there's people that do that, and they'll be like, I like him because he shows he's being, and it doesn't matter like if he sounds so wrong in saying that, or she sounds so wrong in saying that I'm getting the truthful, but people seldom do that. So I'm gonna say that, like, you know, probably 80% of the time, everybody who's on camera is not truly being honest. That's all. Because they're
I
being
agree with
careful
that.
too, and they don't want to be triggering, and they're being politically correct, and they're like, I mean, even in my life today, I had to be careful because I'm not trying to offend people, but there's times where I feel, you know, myself triggered by certain things, and I'm like, I know I wouldn't discuss it that way, but I also have enough respect to like, or self awareness where I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna say things in a way that's like offensive. But I can say things that are offensive in my own light and be truthful because I know it's not coming from a bad place. But other people might not take it that way. So there's a barrier that I have to kind of be like, okay, I'm not gonna say things like how I would so bluntly, and I say things very bluntly, almost like I'm very, I feel like I am very like sharp sometimes. You are too, but you know you almost conduct yourself in a more like, oh, here we are, respect, people. And no, we're just having. Come on.
I think those are the
That's
interesting
what I'm
moments though,
saying. It's
where
not truthful.
if you
That's not
watch,
100% truth. At least it's
well,
not 100% truth. Maybe it's 80-70, but it's not 100%
I
truthful.
mean, if you're in the middle of a show and you're not expecting to cancel it early, then you may go through with the show, continue your professionalism in the sense of like not blowing up the spot. But that doesn't change the fact that people who, if they watch your content all the time, if they've watched a bunch of your content, and they're not really paying attention to your drastic personality swings, or you shutting down the whole podcast and just walking out, because they've never really seen you do that, and you shouldn't do that. It would be just unprofessional at that point. But people will see that, like, oh, this host, he just got pissed off. He's really unhappy now interviewing this person. And then maybe a show that usually goes on for 3 hours, it ends after an hour because there's nothing really holding you there. You can just end it if you want to. And so you see them handle their anger professionally, but you still see the anger. You could see them get irritated with someone and try to handle it professionally, and then just sort of like, what are you talking about? And there's been a lot of cases where an embarrassing moment would happen, like the host or the people on the show actually they just kind of jump out of character, and you're like, "Dude, what are you doing?" You know? And then it gets kind of odd, and people are like, oh, this guy's being kind of a bully on the show or whatever. But that's just another form of like revealing that truth and being able to understand how a person ticks and how you might apply that to your life if you feel like there's anything to gain from this person that would help you grow, or if you're just watching the content for entertainment purposes. And for us, we've done lots of videos where it's our process and you can see footage of us painting something or doing something or up on a lift somewhere. you know we have a lot of content that's like that. That content doesn't give you a single nugget about our personality or who
Mm-mm.
we are. But I think watching a video like this, if you're interested in us as artists and you see like, oh, these guys have done all these different murals and all this is they're artists, they're successful artists, or however you perceive it, then watching footage like this of us would be, I think, some of the most valuable sources for understanding how we tick or what our personalities are like. As much as we might try to be professional or like, okay, I'm not going to talk over you, and then if you see enough of it, like if we just keep doing these and we're up to like 100 of these in a year, and each one is like an hour and a half, or however long it is, people people would definitely be able to interpret things about our personality that are very subtle, that we would be trying sort of not to reveal. But they'd be like, oh, she don't like, she hates it when he says that. Even though you've never said it specifically, it just starts to become obvious over time. For me, it was like that when I watched, and I've spent hundreds of hours watching, content, podcast style content, long form, full podcasts, where I would just be like, oh, okay, he didn't like that. Oh, he hates when people talk about that. And so now just bringing that up, you just frustrated him or her. You obviously haven't watched enough to know. You're just a newcomer on this show. But he hates when people bring that up. So you just ruin your show. It's going to be cut short, that type of thing. But, for me, I'm always trying to pick up information from people that makes me feel like I can gain something from it that's going to contribute to my success and growth. Um, as much as I'm contributing to whoever's show that I'm watching by giving them another viewer, another sort of anonymous viewer. I'm like, what am I getting from this? Like, oh, there's things like consistency, the way that you're interacting, the attempt. to at least hold it together, even though you're angry and you could see it, you still kind of hold it together and like try to get through it. But we can always go back to like, oh look, here's how you paint an eye, or like,
Mm,
here's how we where the truth of it, I don't think we would really give that away even because it becomes proprietary at some point.
well, I
So
think that's like saying, oh, we're giving techniques, and that's like a tutorial
technique,
kind
yeah,
of
that's
video.
different.
But conversation wise, things are about kind of perspective, experience, and processes. Um, you know, does it matter to give away? I mean, I don't think it really matters so much to give away techniques, but that's like a tutorial video more than it is a conversation. Uh, but as far as art is concerned and things like that, is it valuable for somebody to kind of gain some insight from artists? I think most people that are interested in content would potentially prefer that some of that subject matter is there. Otherwise, it's just okay, just two people talking. Yay! Two people
What
talking.
do you think is the most important thing that a person needs to do to be a successful artist, or what does success look like for an artist in 2024?
Just money.
Money. So that's like, what should a person do that wants to be an artist to be
Lock yourself up in a room and do a bunch of pieces, like 50 of them. That's it. That's it. The podcast is over.
there you go. So
No, I'm saying like it's
put some
it's
work
more
in.
than that. It's it takes a lot to try to put passion into something. So, it's energy, it's time, it's right mind state or bad mind state. Sometimes the bad mind state will push you to do some art. But most of the time, you know, to be successful, you just have to be very diligent about the process and open minded. You know, is it gonna guarantee success? No. Now you gotta go and talk to people. You gotta go and make some connections and have some exhibitions and put your name out there and do some legwork. Aside from that, you have to market yourself. And in order to market yourself properly, you have to make sure you're hitting your target audience because that's the way that marketing works, um, for whatever product that you're trying to put out. And it is a product. A lot of people don't think about it that way. So it is a product. Artwork is a product that you're trying to sell and make yourself wealthy off of, or at least, survive off of it so that you're not like starving and just doing art for no reason. So if you treat it like a product and you treat it like a marketing company would treat your product, then a marketing company would say, hey, we got to put you out in the audience. We got to target you to the people who are interested in art and want to buy art. Got to make some videos, some photo shoots, some of this, some interviews, some just different things that
I think my microphone is dead,
did it
or
just
it's
die?
about to die. It's blinking red.
All right, well, we can cut this short. You're gonna have to cut it short because
Yeah, I think that was a good answer. I don't know if this is picking up or not, but I would agree with those things and say, do practical business things, and then figure out where money is, and then go towards the money, and try to keep your personality intact while you do it. Just as abstract as it could possibly be, and
that
that's
sounds very abstract.
well, practical business things are practical, like business cards, website, blah blah blah, the basic stuff. the money is the money. Like, oh, where is there money here? How much can I make if I sell one of these? How much do other people make? Like, oh, can I make $200? That's not gonna be enough. I need to make 10,000. But where's the 10,000? Go look for that. And then when you find something that seems like it's there, then you gotta like go for that. And like, oh, look, we finally did it. We got the first 10,000. Then you'll be on your way into just doing that, trying to do that repetitively. But you have to be targeting where that is. If you have no idea where it is, you're probably just wasting your time. There's no way you can confirm or deny that there's a successful opportunity there. So it's a longer form of the same thing. The Color Dreamers, guys, colordreamers.com, at the Color Dreamers on Instagram,
Yvette
and
Cabrera.
Yvette Cabrera, Amir Shakir, YvetteCabrera.com, AmirShakir.com. Yeah, look us up. You'll find us. We're out there.
See if it's worth your alley, your subject matter.
There you go. May the force be with you.